This is a high-tech production, as you can see, Colin.
And good
Very
evening.
impressed.
And ladies and gentlemen, here you have it. Nick Bryant and Colin Browen. I'm Pete Shin, the Associate Director of Epstein Justice, and thanks for joining us this evening for a deep dive into the Epstein files with Nick Bryant, the director and founder of Epstein Justice, and renowned journalist and podcaster Colin Browen. After Nick and Colin give their presentation, I'll be back with some thoughts on what you might be able to do, and we'll close with Q&A for Nick and Colin. So kindly drop your questions in the chat as soon as they come to you, and we'll do our best to get them answered. Now to our panelists. Nick Bryant is an investigative journalist and child advocate who's been at this for more than 30 years. He spent 7 years investigating a child sex trafficking network that was covered up by state and federal authorities, and that work became the book, The Franklin Scandal, a story of power brokers, child abuse, and betrayal, and is incidentally how I came to know and become friends with Nick Bryant through that book, through reading. Actually, my son read that book and told me, you need to go and reach out to Nick Bryant. And he inspired me to join this cause after I retired from the military. So thank you for that, Nick. I will tell you that Nick also was the first to acquire and publish Jeffrey Epstein's address book, a document that verified Epstein's intimate relationships with elite power brokers in government, academia, business, and global finance, and opened the door to further investigations that ultimately led to Epstein's rearrest in 2019. It also led to Epstein taking an interest in Nick Bryant, as accounted for and documented in Epstein's own emails. Joining him is Colin Browen. Colin is a digital journalist and filmmaker with an audience in the millions. Across the paranormal files, Murder in America, and the conspiracy files, among his other works. What brings him here tonight is what he did when the first wave of unsealed FBI and Department of Justice documents dropped earlier. He got in a truck and he drove to Zorro Ranch. 10,000 acres in the New Mexico desert, named in the files, and, as Colin has pointed out repeatedly, including on News Nation, never the subject of a thorough public federal search. There's a tip about an incinerator in those documents that nobody followed up on. Years passed, the property changed hands. The information was there, nobody acted on it. It's a pattern that's all too familiar. Nick, Colin, over to you.
Thank you so much, Pete.
Thank you,
And
Pete.
I've watched Colin take on the Epstein files, and his coverage of the Epstein files is really amazing. I've been very impressed with it. And we're also working on a project now. And Colin has become an amazing investigator. And he's put together PowerPoints that he and I are going to talk about that haven't been seen very often by they've kind of been neglected. A lot of the PowerPoints that Colin is going to bring up, they're mostly JPEGs. So without further ado, Colin, go for it.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me. Obviously, Nick, you and I have been friends for years now. It's kind of crazy that it's been years, but this project that we've been working on has definitely taken a lot longer than I thought it would at the beginning to bring to life, but we're very, very close to finishing at this point. I want to ask you before we start, where do you or how do you feel about the Epstein files right now and the whole Epstein saga as it stands? Like, where do you think we're at in the process of actually getting justice? Because, in my opinion, looking at all of this from an objective perspective, it seems like everything's kind of come to a halt. I know that they announced today, I believe, that they're releasing more or they're releasing unredacted documents. I just saw this right before I hopped on. But what are your thoughts on where we're kind of at today?
Well, it's very obvious that this administration is not going to indict anybody, not going to indict any of Epstein's co-conspirators. But I've been very troubled by the Democrats on the Oversight Committee because they're calling Epstein's co-conspirators and they're telling very blatant, disingenuous lies. And although we know that this administration probably isn't going to indict any of Epstein's co-conspirators, the Democrats on the Oversight Committee can put in referrals for indictments. And when you lie to Congress or you commit perjury before Congress, that's a felony and punishable up to 5 years. And I'll give you an example of that. Les Wexner told a myriad of lies to the Oversight Committee. And strangely enough, the Oversight Committee didn't call Les Wexner to D.C. They actually went to his house to interview him, if you want to call it the house. And Wexner said, I'll just give you a couple of examples. Wexner said the last time he had anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein is 2006. That's a lie because they've got emails from 2008. Plus, and the New York Times reported this about 3 years ago or so, that Epstein gave Wexner $56 million in 2011. Now, no matter how rich you are, you're not going to forget about $56 million. So those are two examples of Wexner perjuring himself before Congress. So in the very least, there should be 2 referrals for indictments, and he should be looking at 10 years. So the Democrats are letting us down too with this process. And I believe that an independent congressional commission is the only way if we're ever going to get any kind of justice, and we want to understand why Jeffrey Epstein was allowed to traffic children with impunity. It's going to come via an independent congressional commission. And people can go to our website and look at why we're vying for an independent congressional commission, and also what an independent congressional commission entails. But an independent congressional commission would decouple the Epstein investigation from the political system. And until we do that, the political system is going to obfuscate and delay. But we do have one thing going for us. The Epstein Files Transparency Act is a law. And it'll be a law in a month. It'll be a law in a year. It'll be a law in 5 years. As long as the Congress doesn't repeal that law, it's going to be a law. And I think that anybody that really wants to get justice, we can do it. That with that law combined with an independent congressional commission, I think that we can get justice. And without further ado, let's see your PowerPoints, Colin.
So I have kind of assembled a number of files. I tried to find in my kind of database the actual files themselves that I downloaded directly from the DOJ website. So you've got the EFTA numbers on the bottom right-hand corners of a lot of these. And it's just shocking, man. It's really shocking. I mean, I've done dozens of videos on Epstein on my YouTube. I've done hundreds of videos on Epstein on my other social media platforms. I've done full-length podcasts, entire documentaries, and still, every time I go and look through the files again, looking for photographs and just other things that I may have missed or that other people may have missed, I always find more. And these kind of pictures and files that I'm going to show you, here's my screen. These represent some of the files and pictures that I don't think have received enough attention, if any attention at all. And I guess this is the file I kind of want to start with. I mean, when I first saw this image, I was shocked to my core because, I mean, it's just so disturbing to just as a human being to look at an image like this. And then you realize that this is Jeffrey Epstein holding what looks to be a very young child in his arms and like playfully biting into her backside, her underwear. It's just so messed up to me. And I've never seen this picture reported anywhere. I mean, I could be wrong. There could have been a smaller news outlet that ran a story about this image, but I never saw this on any mainstream media outlet. And in fact, when I posted this image, I know that it's a graphic image, but when I posted this image, on different social media platforms, it was removed every single time. And I was given strikes and violations for even trying to raise awareness that this image exists. So this file has been almost the bane of my existence because it's been impossible to share. But I feel like this is a file and a picture that people need to see, because a picture says 1,000 words, or a picture is worth 1,000 words. And, with a lot of these files that you're going to see in what I've assembled, a lot of the images, even the really graphic sexual images, Epstein had them framed and he had them hung up and mounted throughout all of his properties. This picture specifically, I believe, was in his West Palm Beach home. I couldn't give you a precise location, but I know that it was in one of his houses because you can see it in other pictures. But that's something that has always just struck me in such a crazy way. Imagine walking into somebody's house, a friend of yours, or even a business acquaintance, somebody that you're working with, and you see an image like this framed and displayed on a shelf for everybody to see. There's so much meaning in Epstein's homes and the way that he decorated them, and that's something that a lot of people have either ignored or chosen not to really go into. But I mean, a lot of these files that I've pulled have to do with that, because I think looking at how he decorated his properties, or whoever decorated them for him, that can provide a gateway into the mentality and kind of the mind of Epstein and the operation itself. But I mean, Nick, what do you know about this image? Do you know anything more than I do?
I have not seen that before, so it's new to me.
Yeah, and
But
this is,
it's definitely horrific for sure.
well, you'll see with a lot of these too. I went right away, like the moment that they said that the files were being released, and I downloaded every single, I think they were zip file or .rar files from the official website, so that I had all the files. There have been so many images and documents that have been removed from the database. And I wanted to ask you this. I mean, I think we know why it's happening, but why do you think that they're removing stuff from the database?
I think it's pretty obvious. Things that are too incriminating, or an image like this, which really potentially shows the perversity of Jeffrey Epstein at all. They've been basically weeded from the rest of the files. I mean, there's been a number of files that have disappeared, and a lot of those files have been more incriminating than other files. So I think that that's pretty much the reason why that we're seeing the disappearance of files.
Is there an actual, this might be a dumb question, but is there a provision in the law? Is it written into the law somewhere that they're allowed to remove files?
Well, they're not supposed to redact files.
Yeah.
They're not supposed to give out the names of victims. So our Department of Justice has not lived up to the letter of the law. And plus, they're retaining at least, I think, 3 million more documents. Our Department of Justice is not adhering to the Epstein Files Transparency Act. And that's why we have that law in place, as I said earlier, but we're going to need an independent congressional investigation to make sure. And I believe that just with what we have, we could start getting indictments if we really wanted to. And actually, I believe that in 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we could start getting indictments. Sarah Kellen has since flipped, and I'm sure that she could basically give the whole, I mean, she was privy to just about Epstein's entire network. And there's a number of other people that if we put pressure on, especially these procurers and recruiters, if we put pressure on them, they would give up these perps. It would be easy to indict them for child trafficking, which in the federal system is 15 to life. And if they get indicted on 8 counts of child trafficking, which many of them could be, and they're looking at 8 lifetimes in prison, they're going to roll over on the perps. If the Department of Justice had a will to do this. It could be done. But it's not only the Trump administration. I mean, the cover-up started with the George W. Bush administration, and then the Obama administration, and the Biden and Trump administration. So this cover-up is very partisan. It's, I think, one of the few issues that our legislators can really agree on, is to cover up the Epstein files.
Well, with specificity to this image, I mean, in my mind, there's so much to unpack. I mean, we could go through, I've got, I think, like 100 different files pulled right now. But before we move on, like I was saying, looking at Epstein's decor, looking at the pictures that he had proudly displayed on his walls, to me, that's a window into his mind and kind of an inside look at the operation if you know what to look for and you actually analyze it for what you're seeing. But something that sticks out to me, I mean, in a lot of these files that I'm going to show you, you're going to see framed images of Epstein with different children, and on top of that, random images and framed photos and portraits of children that don't even have Epstein in them that were found in his properties. And to me, once again, that is just really weird. And even just that little fact deserves its own investigation in my mind, because the fact that a guy who was already convicted of crimes against children and minors covered his homes and his properties with pictures of children that aren't his, it's just so off-putting. And the fact that these politicians, or the more notable figures in the Epstein orbit that did visit his properties, the fact that they would go to his home and they would see this stuff and they never said anything about it, or they thought it was normal and acceptable, that also speaks volumes, I think. But this picture, I mean, what can you even say? This is it's really horrific. There's also you've probably seen this one, and there's a lot that we could talk about here. But where is it? I've got a bunch of files.
And serial killers and pedophiles keep trophies. They do.
Exactly.
And these could very well be Epstein's trophies.
There's just so many of them, man. There's so many of these pictures. I'm looking for the one. I think I chose the more redacted version, this picture. So, have you seen this one before, Nick?
I have not, no.
So there's actually a more or a less redacted version that shows this baby's face, and it shows this guy. This is Glenn Dubin. And this appears, if you know that's what this is depicting if you see the more uncensored version, but this is literally a picture of like a baby, what looks to be flashing the camera. Like, we don't know if the baby had a diaper on. Obviously, this is all redacted. We don't know what level of clothing the baby had on. But in the actual picture, and I could try find it. I don't know if you actually want to see that, but you can see that the baby's smiling and doing this for the camera. And it is just so bizarre to have this hanging. As you can see, it's in a picture frame, displayed on your shelf. This picture was actually mounted and sitting on one of his shelves in I think it was his library or his study. And you don't see this on mainstream news. You don't see this reported. I've never seen this picture reported anywhere, just like with the other picture. But what do you make of that, Nick? I mean,
Dubin and Eva Anderson was a former girlfriend of Dubin. She's now a medical doctor and was one of the many medical doctors that Jeffrey Epstein used. And she was married to Glenn Dubin. And Glenn Dubin has been named as a perpetrator. They do have kids. So it's entirely possible that this could be one of their kids, because they do have kids. And there's a document I found where Eva Anderson wants to invite Jeffrey Epstein to Thanksgiving in New York. And even Eva Anderson goes, yes, I've got children. I'm paraphrasing. And I believe that I have no problem with Jeffrey Epstein around my children. So I think that there's something quite sinister about Jeffrey Epstein, Eva Anderson, and Glenn Dubin.
And there was there was one email, once again paraphrasing, but we might be talking about the same message, but essentially I believe it was Eva meant messaged Epstein and said, you should come over this night. My teenage daughter's going to have a bunch of friends.
That you'll like. Yes, that's actually a different email. The email that I'm referring to, I believe Eva Anderson sent it to his parole officer.
And that's what's crazy to me, Nick, is, a lot of these people that were in Epstein's world, they've tried to absolve themselves in the media, and they've said they cut connections and they cut ties and whatever, they distance themselves. But we've seen, obviously, through the release of these files, that a lot of these people never actually severed the ties, and they kept in communication with Epstein, and a lot of them kept hanging out with him. And this is after he was, essentially declared a pedophile. So I think the company that you keep says a lot about you. I keep you in my company, so I don't know what that says about me. It's just one of those things where, you walk into your buddy's house and he's got a picture of his friend's toddler flashing the camera, presumably naked, in a picture frame, proudly displayed for anybody to see. Isn't that just weird? I mean, wouldn't someone see that and be struck with a very deeply unsettling feeling? I mean, it's mind-boggling that people didn't say anything.
As a guy that's been investigating Epstein since 2011, I can say that nothing in Epstein's world has any kind of normalcy. Nothing.
Right.
And everything that Epstein comes into contact with gets bent. It's kind of like he's this black hole. Florida law enforcement got bent. The FBI, the Justice Department got bent. Columbia University, MIT got bent. I mean, wherever Epstein goes, there's corruption.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you on that. To get through some more of these, I mean, this is just another example of photos that were found in Epstein's properties. I don't know where these pictures were, once again, but I mean, the fact that they're framed and displayed in the home, this to me is such an eerie looking photograph, because it just it feels like a visual representation of like a sexual assault. It's really, really graphic, and it's hard to even really make out what's happening. I think that is probably Epstein's arm and hand pointing at what looks to be this young girl's like underwear, or I don't know what's going on with that. But I mean, these are things that he had framed and hung up in his house. And I've just never seen anyone talk about this. I mean, there's dozens, hundreds of images in the files of pictures just like this, where the girls / women that are seen in the pictures are fully nude, they're half nude. And it's not like he kept these in a little journal or a scrapbook for himself to visit late at night. We know that he was a pervert, but I mean, these were things that he had printed out and that he had mounted and displayed in proper frames. I mean, there's literally so many of them. I could have done a whole presentation just on the kind of graphic photos that were found in Epstein's properties. But here's a different one. Now, what do you make of this? This is a photo I also haven't seen a lot of people talking about, but to me, this looks like Epstein at a U.S. Department of Homeland Security facility.
Well, there's emails where he's talking about SCIFs, going to SCIFs, which are very top secret locations. And there's, I think, more than one email that talks about him going to a SCIF. So Epstein definitely had many connections to intelligence. You can go to the Epstein Justice blog, and I wrote a 3-part series on Jeffrey Epstein's connections to intelligence and the connections that Jeffrey had to people that were intelligence. So I think it would be, it's an edifying article. It's very straightforward. It's called Epstein and the CIA.
But they have obviously, they've denied that Epstein had any sort of connection to any sort of federal, state, whatever authority. And yet, I mean, there's a picture of him in the files, standing behind what appears to be the podium in the press room at the White House. There's a picture of him at what looks to be a Homeland Security facility here. I mean, I don't know who this woman is. And I don't know. It's just, it's mind-boggling, and it's perplexing to me that a lot of these images haven't been seen by more people, because to me, when I look at this screams complicity, or, he had some sort of involvement with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, whatever that involvement was, or who this woman was. I have no idea, but clearly he was more involved than anybody has led on to in the government nowadays. I don't know if you saw the recent Joe Rogan appearance with JD Vance, where he declares that he's an OG Epstein conspiracy theorist. And he states, I think it goes all the way up to the top, man. And it's like, dude, you are the top. Like, you are the conspiracy. It's just, that's where we're at. And then, I mean, a side note, something that I thought was absolutely unbelievable, was watching during the correspondence dinner the other night, watching those journalists from, what is it, the Wall Street Journal, that exposed Trump's birthday letter to Epstein.
Yes.
I think it was Wall Street Journal. Watching them receive the award for courageousness in reporting, for reporting on the fact that the United States president had written this birthday letter to an alleged serial pedophile sex trafficker. And, they even announced that Trump had sued them for $10 billion. They basically ran through the whole story, and they give the journalists the award. And then on video, the journalists walk over to Trump and shake his hand one by one. And in the middle of all of that, Trump looks at the camera of the audience and kind of does like expression like that. And the whole room erupts with laughter. To me, that's like a very potent kind of, like, I don't want to say metaphor. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but that's just where we're at with the Epstein files. It's almost a joke to those people at the top. Like, I just could not believe I was seeing that actually happen. The guy shaking the hands of the journalists who exposed his ties to Epstein after he sued them, and then looking at the crowd and everybody laughing, and then they just move on. And that's, on to the next joke, on to the next speaker, the next award. Did you see that, Nick?
I did. And the media being complicit is, we've seen multiple examples of that. The New York Times published an article, I think about 3 months ago, could have been a little bit longer, that said Jeffrey Epstein had no ties whatsoever to anyone, to the CIA. And it was so disingenuous, because it was sins by omission. Jeffrey Epstein was working with a arms distributor named Douglas Leese, and Douglas Leese introduced him to Adnan Khashoggi, who is one of the most infamous war profiteers of all time. And when the United States was involved in Iran-Contra, which the CIA was certainly involved in, Adnan Khashoggi was neck deep in all that. That particular article, it's 8,500 words, and it deploys 8 New York Times journalists, and it does not mention Adnan Khashoggi once. And you can go to the Wikipedia page on Jeffrey Epstein, and it mentions that Adnan Khashoggi and Epstein were business partners together. The Wikipedia page. So obviously the New York Times had an agenda with that article. And it's really unfortunate, because it was so disingenuous.
Right. I saw that article and I read it, and I could not believe what I was reading. Just like you said, lies by omission. Just so much information that exists, that's out there, that's already known, that's been written and published. that was just ignored. But I mean, that's what you find with a lot of the kind of anti-Epstein truth crowd. You know, they want to try to tell the Epstein story, but they purposefully omit so much. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. All of these pictures and files. I mean, these are things I've never seen anybody in the mainstream media talk about. We go through, I mean, just a few of them quick. Like, here's Epstein with a kid. Don't know who this is. Don't know when this picture is from. I don't know who this guy is either. I know somebody's identified this guy, but this looks to be a screenshot of Epstein's MacBook. I mean, it's just so weird. You know, you can see, I think this is Epstein on like Face or Skype with this guy and his kid, unexplained. To me, that would deserve more of an investigation, but you know, all this is completely normal that you're seeing. Pictures of kids, pictures of kids, picture of a kid. Don't know who any of those kids are. Um, Now, this is what I wanted to talk about. This, I believe it was in his New York mansion, or no, I think it was in Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, where they found the filing cabinet. Once again, I can't remember. I mean, there's so much here, but in one of the filing cabinets, they found, and it's photographed many times in the files, this purple manila folder that's labeled massages. Now, I just made a video about this recently, and you know, I reiterated the point that there is no Epstein list. You know, I think it's hilarious that Pam Bondi said, "Oh, I have the list." Like, she actually said that out loud, and then of course she never delivered a list, because you'd be absolutely insane to even think that a list ever existed in the first place. But I feel like the information that was found inside of a folder like this would be in some way an Epstein list. You know, who knows what was in here? Was this
Well, with Epstein, when I found the address book, Epstein euphemistically put massages where his victims were,
right?
and young women. So that particular folder would probably be filled with a number of names. I mean, like the the address book or the black book that I got is filled with a lot of names. There's a lot of witnesses. There are scores and scores of witnesses. There are, the government has said up to 1,200 victims. There were limo drivers, there were pilots, there were chefs, there were people that took care of Epstein's homes. There are so many witnesses for to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes that if our Department of Justice had any kind of will whatsoever, we could start indicting people next week.
Yeah, but yeah, it's always shocking to me to see the lists of employees, and you know, just to think about, you know, Epstein's life and his lifestyle in general, and to think about how many people he interacted with on a regular basis and how many people essentially he employed at his various properties. Um, to really sit and realize that they haven't really interviewed any of those people, or you know, they haven't tried to in the first place. It's another one of those mind-blowing things where you're like, you know, if I were a detective, I would have been interviewing these people years ago, back in 2019, or even the beginning of 2019, when all this really started reaching another boiling point. um, but they never did. And in the case of this file, I don't know what was found inside of this. I haven't been able to track this down. I've asked people for help. No one's been able to find out if there was any information in here, but it's just another one of those. It's almost like a red herring, because you want to spend time trying to figure out if there is a document within the 3 million plus pages that corresponds to this folder, but you know, to my knowledge, it's never been found. And you could see this folder in a number of different photos. So they obviously, I mean, you could see here, took it into evidence, but what was inside of the folder, uh, that's what we don't know. All right, so here's kind of the big one that I pulled. So many pictures here. So one thing, to talk about Epstein's decorating for a moment. One thing that I noticed that was really strange is that across his properties, Epstein had an obsession with body parts. And it's actually really strange. It sounds like an out there concept when you first kind of hear me say that, but if you look through the files and you look through the photos taken at Epstein's properties, you will start to see that he was a collector of body parts, essentially. And I can't remember. I think it was Ehud Barak's wife who said he was a collector of people. I can't remember who that quote is attributed to, but I mean, this is all from his New York mansion. You had this bust of a woman. You had these two busts in what looked to be a closet, and then you had another bust here. All of women's chests and their nude forms, and you even go here to the bathroom. This is one of the most striking images to me. Um, a ballerina's leg sticking out of the wall right above what looks to be the bathtub. Um, Definitely, in my opinion, the creepiest piece of art I think I've ever seen in my life. I don't know how you could possibly see this and want to hang this in your bathroom, but I don't know. Do you think that he was sending almost a subliminal message, Nick, or do you think he was even projecting a part of himself that he was practically collecting women or viewed them as some sort of currency that he could have control over? I think that there's something there that's really interesting. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Jeffrey Epstein was a misogynist to the 10th power,
Right.
without a doubt. And his mind was so twisted that images like the ballerina or these various body parts, we know that his mind was very twisted, but we don't really know why he chose to collect these types of things. As I said earlier, I think some of the things that he's collected are basically trophies.
Right.
I think some of those pictures are probably trophies, but I have no idea what to make of the body parts.
I mean, you've even got this is another picture from New York. This is a photo that I had a lot of people kind of react to. Uh, Little stone babies curled up under one of his tables. I don't know what these things are or what they represent, but I mean, it's just such strange decor for a convicted pedophile's home. You know, you got to add in the fact that he was already convicted of what he was convicted of in Florida at the time that these pictures were taken. This was his home after, the penultimate or the ultimate arrest, I should say. I mean, even go down to every hallway. I mean, Epstein's properties were like a house of horrors if you actually look at them. I mean, this little what looks to be kid, maybe like a shoe shine kid, sitting on a bench in a random hallway in his home. An image of as you can see here, a zebra being flayed. You can see what I think this is like its fat and its muscle as the animal is ripped apart. I mean, there's so much art, dude. We could talk for hours about the art. I didn't pull any of like the paintings, except for this one. This was also in New York. And I think this is another image that a lot of people that have watched my stuff reacted to pretty strongly. I mean, this is a gigantic, what looks to be painting depicting a nude child with an erection, while what looks to be adult woman looks on. I think this is like a Greek myth that's being played out, or I can't remember exactly the backstory to this image, but this is just in a random bedroom in Epstein's home. And when you take a look at the rooms inside of his house, to me, they don't feel like home at all. Like you imagine a very, very rich person. And what comes to mind when I think of like someone who's very wealthy is, a sense of taste. And, they have people that design their homes for them. They have people that plan out every square inch of their properties to make them as really beautiful as possible. But when it comes to Epstein, especially in the New York townhouse, every room feels like something out of a horror movie or a fever dream. Like the colors don't match. The walls are painted these strange colors. And then you've got gigantic paintings of literally nude children hanging on the walls. Um, And that's where I think a lot of the mystery still exists, in Epstein's art collection and the things that he chose to display. Because they say a lot. I mean, even at Zorro Ranch, there are emails talking about how he wanted the painting "The Massacre of the Innocents" displayed essentially right in the entryway when people walk into the property. This is a painting depicting literally the slaughter of babies. It's, I think, a Christian story, "The Massacre of the Innocents," but I mean, when you walk into somebody's house once again and you see a gigantic painting of babies being murdered, wasn't that off-putting to anybody? I mean, how about this painting? You walk into a bedroom at Epstein's house and you see this. This is just so incredibly out there and weird. Um, but yeah,
Epstein was actually proud of what he did. He was
yeah.
proud of being a pedophilic pimp. He wore it on his sleeve. You did not have to hang out with Jeffrey Epstein for very long to know exactly what he was about. He wore it on his sleeve.
And that's the thing, Nick. And I wonder your take on this. I've often, I've gone through thousands, tens and tens of thousands of the actual photos looking for the pictures from the investigations that have really stuck out to me. And what I've noticed in how Epstein kind of conducted himself and lived and existed, um, is that he had a definite kind of style that he went with in his properties, very dysfunctional, tons of pictures hanging up everywhere, picture frames of all different varieties, nothing really matched. But throughout all of his artwork and even the figurines that he had on his walls, most of the art, if you want to call it that he chose to display in the properties, was very sexual. I mean, you've got figures literally having sex that you can see in some pictures. You've got dozens, if not hundreds, of nude photographs of victims, could be even random people, we don't know. Um, and these were on like every wall, every surface. So the whole property had, especially in New York, a sense of a sexuality to it. Do you think, my hypothesis is that, you know, I feel like Epstein was placing all this throughout the home, because he was proud of what he did and because he was obviously a sex addict and a pervert. But also something that I've thought about is, was he putting this stuff up to get people into a certain frame of mind? Because we know a lot of abuse occurred at the New York house. So was he trying to prep the people that he was having over, um, to make them more workable, to get them to do these things? Like, what do you think about that thought?
That's an interesting hypothesis. I think, as I said earlier, people that were hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein knew what he was about. And this could be just part of the ambiance that
Right.
he created, not necessarily to prime the people that would molest these children, but to, well, I guess I prime them, I think would be a good word to use.
Because it's weird because you, like I said, I've gone through all these pictures and I've seen all the sexual artwork. I mean, the massage room in the New York house, I mean, there are tons of graphic images just in that room alone. But what's even weirder to me is that there is this sexual element to Epstein's decorating style that is seen throughout his properties. But then you got pictures of kids, literally just, in between nude photographs of women. You've just got this framed and mounted image of a child sleeping on what looks to be a blanket. Or in this case, you can see here, looking down the hallway, they didn't redact this image, a young girl on Epstein's shoulders hung up on the wall. And I mean, you go 5 feet from this portrait, probably into this room or the room over here, and you're going to see more portraits of nude women and girls and victims. So that's something that, has bothered me, because the amount of pictures of Epstein with kids throughout his properties that he had displayed is, it's just off-putting. I mean, these aren't his kids. At minimum, they're his friends' kids. I mean, technically, we don't really know. They could be his kids. We just don't know. But I mean, not to go back to it and kind of beat a dead horse, but I have just said repeatedly to people, like, if I walked into some guy's house and he had images of him with all these different people's children, hugging them and snuggling them, and tons of pictures of kids framed and hung up like young kids, you'd imagine that you would kind of understand that this guy is a sick freak that you shouldn't hang out with. I mean,
I think I would be out of there really quickly.
yeah, me too. And he's already been convicted of crimes against minors. So, for the people, the reason that I say all this is, if you went to Epstein's property and you went back and you continued to hang out with them, it shows that you knew more than you've probably led on to in the media. And like all the people that have visited all of Epstein's, whether it's Zorro Ranch or Epstein Island, the New York house, they had to know, but they've all remained quiet and acted like they know nothing. Some other weird stuff. I mean, these statues I just thought were very peculiar. This looks to be a fertility statue.
Where was this statue?
This is Epstein Island.
Epstein Island.
I can't remember what they called this. Maybe it was the pagoda or something like that, but this is just kind of a little structure hidden down on the side, the face of the island. And these statues kind of move. There are other pictures that I found where there's a version of this statue that looks to be like 12 feet tall. And, it's just really interesting to me. Why would he place this there? You obviously have to bring an object like that to the island. So there had to be some sort of a purpose or a desire for that object to be located there and then to be placed in the area where it was placed. It's not an easy task to, get this thing all the way across the island from wherever the landing dock is and hike it up and place it there. And then even here, you got the New York house. This stuck out to me. It's so bizarre. An entire set of what looks to be patio furniture with an open umbrella just set up inside of the home. I mean, those are just the weird things that stick out to me that are really off-putting, like it's just weird, man. I know we don't have as much time as I thought we would, but more pictures that deserve more of an investigation. I think pictures of what are probably wounds sustained by survivors or victims, more kids. This appears to be a girl, obviously on her 18th birthday, typical groomer predator photograph to save on your device. More kids on a safari, cheerleading outfit, woman and her kid. I mean, this one I've seen a lot of people talk about. I don't know who this is, but it's a kid with a giant monkey gorilla toy. More injuries sustained by probably a victim / survivor.
Where did you get these pictures of those injuries?
These are from the files. These are all the EFTA numbers are down here. Oops.
Wow. And I wonder who took those pictures.
Exactly. Well, there's actually a photo set that I covered in a video where it looks like, I mean, you can't ever definitively tell if a person that you're looking at is a victim or a survivor, or if their identity was just redacted. You never really know, but there's a set of images taken in Epstein's New York mansion that show a girl injured. Looks like she's got a leg injury. And it appears that Ghislaine Maxwell was actually just walking around taking photographs. It's like a linear thing where you can see the progression of the night. This girl's injured. She seems to be in pain. Then you see paramedics come in. The paramedics are looking at the camera, smiling and laughing. It shows the girl with this pretty grotesque leg injury being loaded into an ambulance. And then the final image in that set of pictures is Epstein standing outside of the hospital smiling. So it's just one of those things where, none of that has an explanation. Like, we know what we're looking at. And when you look at an image like this, you're looking at some sort of injury, but you don't know who sustained the injury. I mean, this one's even more graphic, but we have no clue who this is, who this happened to. what ended up happening? What are the circumstances? Why are the arrows drawn on this image? Who drew the arrows? Who was this sent to? Yeah, I mean, it's really weird, man, obviously.
Epstein had, as I said earlier, a number of physicians on his payroll. I
Right.
mean, Eva Anderson was one of them. He had a go-to shrink named Henry Jarecki. And Henry Jarecki has sons that are directors, Nicholas and Andrew. But Epstein would send, and Henry Jarecki was also a billionaire in his own right. He got into high finance while he was apparently being a psychiatrist. But Epstein would send his victims to Jarecki. And Jarecki would give them benzodiazepines, tranquilizers, antidepressants, whatever he thought. But there was a lawsuit where one of Epstein's victims, and actually she did get money from the Epstein Victims Compensation Program, in her lawsuit filing said that Jarecki basically made her a sex slave and that he would take her to gatherings where she would be molested by multiple men. And Jarecki said that it was a consensual relationship. And Brad Edwards, in an email, I think the CNBC goes, yeah, there's 60 years differential. It doesn't sound like much of a consensual relationship to me. But Epstein had all these doctors. And I can remember Virginia Giuffre told me pretty early on that she'd been put in a hospital by a perp and that there wouldn't be any records of her in that particular hospital.
Yeah, well, you see also in the files, I've also talked in videos about there's a lot of mention of gynecologists, of
Yes.
Epstein paying for gynecology set not sessions, appointments. There's also a lot of talk of like dentists and dental work. It's really interesting that he had that network of people that he could count on. I mean, let's say this is an injury sustained by a victim. I mean, yeah, it's like you said, Epstein could have taken this picture and sent it to someone he trusted and asked them, what do we do about this? But because no investigation was ever really done that looked into the files that were released, these are all just unanswered questions. We don't even know whose legs these are. I mean, this could be a man, a woman, like we just don't know.
There's an email from Mark Epstein, Epstein's brother, to Epstein inquiring about a gynecologist. And Mark said something to the effect that that Epstein single-handedly kept the gynecologist in business. So whoever that gynecologist is, he's another physician that's part of Jeffrey Epstein's network. And if Epstein is sending girls to him the way that Mark claims he is, I mean, how could that gynecologist not really know what Jeffrey Epstein was about?
Right. Well, I mean, they had to know.
Yes.
If you're a logical person, you can look at so much of this stuff, whether it's evidence or documents, and you can just clearly say to yourself, yeah, this person knew what was going on, or yes, this person was definitely complicit in helping to run this operation. But that's what's so frustrating is that it's like people like you and I, and most of the people here in America, we can call a spade and recognize this entire affair for what it is and what it was. And yet nobody at the federal level has enough, I don't even know what it would be, like enough
Conscience.
courage.
It's
Yeah.
called conscience.
Yeah. Or conscience to actually just call it what it is. I mean, for God's sakes, they still claim that Epstein wasn't a trafficker. He didn't traffic anybody. Even though he had whatever they said in their press release, over 1,000 victims on videotape. He was just a serial pedophile who only did this for himself. So I mean,
That proclamation last July 5th that where Epstein and Maxwell acted alone, that all the child abuse material that was recovered from Jeffrey Epstein's home was downloaded from the internet, that there was no blackmail. When I read that document, I was pretty stunned that, again, very disingenuous,
Yeah.
really disingenuous. And Americans know better than that at this point. And I think that Americans really do want to correct this.
Yeah. Well,
Americans have had, we as Americans, we've been lied to pretty prolifically, and we've suffered pretty prolifically because of those. The lies that led to Bush II's invasion of Iraq, I mean, those were really disingenuous lies, costed us billions and billions of dollars. The financial meltdown in 2007, 2008, which was precipitated by Jeffrey Epstein's good buddy, Larry Summers, and Bill Clinton, where they repealed Glass-Steagall, where commercial banks and venture banks were no longer, there was no longer a dividing line. So essentially what they created was the world's greatest casino, and millions of Americans lost their homes. And no heads rolled. And actually, the guys that ran those banks that caused so much distress to so many Americans, they were actually bailed out with very high salaries. There was Snowden. What Snowden revealed about how Americans are being spied upon illegally, I mean, is pretty stunning.
Yeah.
All the various operations. So Americans, we've been conditioned, I believe, to think that we can't affect change. But we can affect change. It's up to us to overcome that conditioning. And we have to stand up. What the lies that the government keeps telling us are rather absurd. And this is an issue, Epstein is an issue that can bring the right and the left together. And I think it's really the only issue that can bring the right and the left together, because we can all agree that children shouldn't be molested with impunity.
yeah. I mean, I don't know how you could disagree with that. You'd have to be a member of the Epstein network to disagree with that sentiment. Real quick, I know we got to close out, but here's that image unredacted of the baby pulling you can see Dubin back here. And there's just more, you got Epstein here with, a lot of people have seen this image, Epstein on his plane with the kid in his lap. Here's another one of Epstein, different day because it's different clothes. It looks like another kid looks to be on his plane. Here's that other statue I was talking about. This is at a different part of the island, but this is a different version of that statue, which I just find to be peculiar.
That's Reid Hoffman right there. I just wrote an article about good old Reid Hoffman. You can find it at Zero Hedge. It's called The Epstein Victims Being Exploited Yet Again. and Reid plays a role in that.
Well,
that one's pretty bizarre.
Yeah, I have no explanation for this. Appears to be Albert Einstein kissing a robot. Yeah, I mean, we got through most of what I was going to talk about. I mean, you got the mask.
Now, this is bizarre. This room is really bizarre with the masks.
Yeah, what's your take on this, Nick? I've seen a lot of different theories.
I saw Peter Levenda getting interviewed, and he said that it was from out of a movie, but I can't remember the movie that he said that the scene was from. I'll go back into my notes and take a look at it. But according to Peter, this is taken from some type of a movie. I think a very dark movie.
You've even got, you'll think this is weird too. Like, I'm not going to click on these, but Epstein sent himself what looks to be porn links in 2018. These are probably videos that he was into. I saw someone point this out online. This is a screenshot from one of those videos. And I clicked it and verified it. That's
pretty bizarre.
really strange. I mean, not only the kids in the background, but I mean, like, what the hell is this? It's it's really it's inexplicable, you know.
It
It's
looks
one of
like
those
Freddy
things.
Krueger.
I know, but these are things that unless you actually dig for weeks on end, you would never see this stuff. And most people haven't seen this stuff. I mean, even right here is another example of what I'm talking about, where you've got uh, Epstein with what looks to be a very young, probably girl. Another framed image of him with a young child on a bed just at one of his properties. I mean, I'm telling you, man, I know you know this, but those images are everywhere and there's no rhyme or reason to them. And if you really start studying the stuff that he hung up and that he surrounded himself with, it really does. I feel like it gives you a window into Epstein's mind and into the whole thing. There's a lot of weird stuff in his properties, and that's a whole angle I feel like a lot of people have missed out on actually looking into, trying to make sense of like why this was placed here or why these things were printed out and framed, or like where I mean, there's even an email about I can't remember what assistant of his said this, but she was talking to someone and they were talking about bringing Epstein back a bowl made of a human skull from another country. Like that's just the kind of weird shit that he was into. I'm a weird guy, so I understand that, it takes a lot for people to kind of
Well, you're not that weird.
no, no, no. That's a very important distinction to make. Um, but
I
yeah,
knew that there were children that were under the age of 12. Actually, Virginia Giuffre in her 2015 affidavit said that there were 12-year-olds that weren't involved in these pedophilic orgies. But then I know two therapists, and I've talked about them before. One's a pretty eminent psychologist, and they counseled patients that they felt had been trafficked by Epstein when they were under the age of 10 years old.
and
And
yet
and then
nothing in
there's
the
other
media.
evidence for that too.
I mean, there are actually people who dedicate their time to saying that that's not what Epstein was into. It's. I mean, I've even seen people posting like takes on social media where they're stating that you know these girls were old enough to know what they were getting into. Like I know what I was doing when I was 14, and I knew better than that. I mean, it's just disgusting the way that a lot of people continue to treat the survivors and victims in this story. And those are just the survivors and victims we know about. I know you know this, but there's so many leads just in the photos, and so many faces, and it's really haunting to sit and think, did they ever talk to this person? Do they even know who this girl is? Do they know who this child is? What happened to this person? How did they end up in a framed portrait in Epstein's house? I mean, there are just so many of those different paths that they could take for an investigation if they actually decided to get off their asses really, and
Well,
do
actually,
something.
the uh, FBI in Miami did a pretty amazing job investigating Jeffrey Epstein. They found over 40 victims, and there was a 60-count indictment that was drafted against Epstein. And one of the counts was child trafficking, which is a heavy sentence in the federal system. It's 15 to life. And the FBI did a really good job in the investigation, but then Alexandra Acosta quashed everything. And Alexandra Acosta, there's actually an email where Ken Starr and some FBI brass are going to meet Acosta and put pressure on him to stop the investigation. And Acosta did ultimately stop that investigation, and Jeffrey Epstein got his sweetheart deal, and all his co-conspirators got immunity. And as I've said before, there's constitutionally there's only two people in the government that can tell a U.S. attorney to stand down, and one is the attorney general, and one is the president. And at that time, the Attorney General was Alberto Gonzales, and the president was Bush too. But I can't imagine an Attorney General going out on a limb like that without his immediate employer, the president, telling him to. So I think that that deal that was made, that sweetheart deal, it went all the way up to Bush too.
No doubt, Nick. I mean, this is just one of those stories that, everything it touches turns insidious and murky.
Well, as I said, it's Epstein is a black hole that everything that comes into contact with it gets bent.
It's like the opposite of the Midas touch.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I mean, I've gotten through most of my pictures. If you want to take questions, or I don't know what you want.
We're gonna have Josh talk about Epstein Justice, and then we'll take questions. So go for it, Josh.
Great. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Yeah.
All right, great. Had a little technical difficulties at the beginning here, so I'm going to make sure I can share my screen as well. Good deal. Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys very much. That was a really, really informative presentation. And that is a big part of what we are doing at Epstein Justice. A big reason why it started was Nick realized that awareness obviously was an important component to finding justice in all of this. But what I want to talk about is the next step, which is action. So you all have come here for the awareness and you've heard about this. And I just want to double down on everything that Colin and Nick have brought to light tonight. This was all covered up by our government, and it is on us, the individuals, to do something about this. The government has made it clear that without a lot of pressure from us, they're not going to do anything. So that's what I want to talk to you about tonight is what we can do as a movement, as Epstein Justice. First of all, if you haven't already, I want you to make sure that you're following us on Facebook, on Instagram. You go to epsteinjustice.com, join the movement. You can just enter your email address and that'll get you all fixed up. We'll send you all the information. You can find out when things like this cool t-shirt are going to be available to help support this movement, but also drive awareness yourself. And all sorts of announcements that we'll be getting into here in a little bit. So the big thing we want to talk about is 2026. This is our year. This is a big year. Every seat in Congress is up for election. That means that every congressional candidate has a challenger. And every one of those challengers wants to hear from you. They're craving grassroots support. And strangely, because they're not in Washington yet, they seem extremely eager to sign our pledge. The ones who are already in Washington are a little bit more hesitant to do that. But we have had success with congressmen in Washington. We do have systems in place to get their attention, which I'll get into. This pledge applies to either sitting congressmen or congressional challengers. And what this pledge, what we're asking of these challengers, the exact pledge is, I pledge to vote yes for a single subject bill securing a congressional commission for an independent investigation into the Epstein case. That should be a very easy pledge for any member of Congress or challenger to make. We have two objectives behind that bill: to find out why our government covered it up and to prosecute those who committed these crimes. So we've got all sorts of strategies to approach these challengers and approach members of Congress. But if you are able to get in front of them, this is always up there, epsteinjustice.com/pledge. You can always direct a challenger or a congressperson to this page and they can get more information on the pledge. And that's where they actually send their pledges to us. So this is what the pledge looks like. They fill out their signature. It's got that exact pledge on there, and we're collecting pictures of the challengers and the congressmen with this actually. So it's great for social media. Here's some recent challengers who have all committed. They've all signed the pledge. And the next thing we have for Congress specifically is what we call the comment bomb. So bombcongress.com, whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching a replay of this in the future, right now you can go to bombcongress.com. Don't worry, it's totally safe, and we never ever endorse any kind of actual violence. This is a comment bomb. So what it will do is it'll take you to our current congressman that we are focusing on. It'll take you to their Instagram post that we've chosen. And there you can drop a comment that looks like this. Please stand with Epstein Justice, or you can add whatever kind of flavor you want to it. But when we all come together and we all comment on Congressman Greg Casser's Instagram, he cannot ignore this. This is the kind of thing that when we're done with this comment bomb and we call his office, they know who we are and they're expecting that call. And this has already proven to get us a sit down with congressmen. So we encourage you all to join the comment bomb by going to join the comment bomb by going to Bomb Congress right now and leave the comment, please stand with Epstein Justice. Last thing, obviously donations are very important. This is a fast growing movement. We are hanging on as tight as we can, mostly held together by volunteers. So any donations that we can get to help our infrastructure across 50 states, over 400 congressional districts, just pumping out as much as we can and organizing as much as we can. We've got some great new people who have come onto the staff that we'll be announcing soon. We've got lots of plans for more awareness and more activism in the future, but we definitely need your donations. So epsteinjustice.com/donate will get you there. And that's all I have for you all tonight. I just want to thank you again, and I want to remind you that that is a huge part of this. We can come here for the awareness, we can spread the awareness, but we need to get involved and we need to act. Please, epsteinjustice.com, fill out your email, and you'll stay in the know. And I'll hand this back over to Pete for the question and answer. Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you, Josh, and appreciate all the work that you've done to help move this forward and get accountability. And now we do have a number of questions, Nick and Colin, as you will well imagine from that outstanding presentation. Gripping is what I would call it, and deeply disturbing. And one of the things that struck me, if I may say right out of the gate, is that it strikes me as fundamentally true when Melinda Gates said she took one step into Jeffrey Epstein's apartment and said, and turned around. What normal person wouldn't see what you showed us, Colin, and say, and turn around and walk out? That being said, let me get to our first question. And our first question is, why, and by the way, all of these come from our YouTube commenters, so thank you for these questions. Why haven't there been obstruction of justice lawsuits brought against the Trump administration? And I'll just present that question as it was asked.
Well, you want to take a shot at it, Colin, or you want me?
No, Nick, you got it.
Why haven't there been obstruction of justice? I mean, the thing is, as I said earlier, you've got this administration, but you've also had you've had two Republican administrations and you've had two Democratic administrations covering this up. And the Democrats on the oversight committee are very complicit at this point, as far as it's a dog and pony show. They're not even putting in referrals for indictments. And this case, the obstruction has been going on for many, many years. And what we've seen is victims being represented by attorneys who sued Jeffrey Epstein's estate. But that's the Epstein Victims Compensation Program. But if someone gets a settlement from the Victims Compensation Program, they're not allowed to sue anybody else unless their lawyers allow them to sue. So that's really horrific. We've got that going on. And yes, we do need obstruction of justice lawsuits. But what we've seen with litigation thus far, and we talked earlier about Jeffrey Epstein being a black hole that bends everything. That's the case. And the Victims Compensation Program, I know that it's helped some of the survivors out. But the document that came out in July said that there's over 1,000 victims and 225 Epstein victims or survivors applied for the program, and 150 grants were awarded. But I think there were 8 to 12 that didn't that opted not to go with the program because they didn't want to sign the little white line that on the little red line that says you're not going to be able to sue anybody. So we could use some really dedicated attorneys to go with obstruction of justice. And I think that we could use attorneys that didn't lock these survivors into the Epstein Victims Compensation Program so they could sue other perpetrators.
Yeah.
Very good. Colin, do you have thoughts on that as well?
I mean, I think, Nick, you kind of wrapped it up pretty well there. But I mean, obviously, I'm in the camp. I believe that the people that are in power at this moment, who have already had their hands on this thing, who are all over this thing, are now complicit in the cover up. So until there's new blood, until there's somebody who is voted in or brought in, even like you guys are lobbying for the independent body to kind of dig into all of this, I don't think anything's going to change, because these people, at this point, they've taken their positions and they're there. They got their feet firmly planted in the ground. They're rooted now, and they're not going to change. Somebody else is going to have to come and actually affect change that is external to the system that is running this right now. So that's why I'm excited for November, because hopefully there will be a change of guard that will bring in some people that actually want to see something done here.
Well, and that leads to another question, which is comes from another YouTube listener, which is, if Democrats win in November, do you think anything will change regarding the files? In a related question, if the Epstein and you've addressed this a little bit already, Nick, but if the Epstein scandal was covered up by the last three presidential parties, or well, it says presidential parties, but let's just say last three presidents, can you fully blame Trump? What other presidents helped cover this up? And of course, you've kind of covered this a little bit, but this goes way back.
Bush too. The Epstein, we have documentation from the FBI that Maria Farmer made edified the FBI about Jeffrey Epstein in 1996. But this was definitely, and we don't know where it got stopped as far as an investigation, at what level of the FBI, if it made it out to the FBI or made it to the Department of Justice. But we know for sure that, as I said earlier, George Bush, too, started the cover up, and it's been 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. But it's going to be up to Americans to say, we want to put our foot down. And this is going to require substantial change. The labor movement, very early on, soldiers were called in to shoot strikers. I mean, it was looked at as very, very radical. And ultimately, unions became status quo, although since the Reagan administration, they've been whittled down a bit. And then you had civil rights. Civil rights was a hell of a battle, and we ultimately won. And women's rights, another battle that we won. And gay rights is another battle that we won. And it took a very concerted effort. And this is going to take a concerted effort. There's 300 million adults in America. And if we just had 10% of them, we could make this happen.
Well, I've talked about this before, and you and I have talked about this, Nick. When I don't know if people online I've talked about this on my channel. I did a whole documentary on this when I was in Belgium a few years ago. There's a very, very similar affair to the Epstein scandal that unfolded in Belgium in the 90s, early 2000s. It's called the Marc Dutroux affair. Mark Dutroux is a guy who, if you look on his Wikipedia, he's called a serial killer, but he was essentially like an Epstein sort of figure. He was procuring children and young girls to be used and abused by a ring of very powerful predators that went all the way to the monarchy in Belgium. There were people that admitted in court that that's what was happening. There's even a central figure in that affair who declared, I can't remember his exact words, but something along the lines of, I'm the beast of Belgium, but they'll never arrest me and actually do something to me because I would take the whole system down. So that's all documented. And when that case was covered up in Belgium in the 90s, which involved the deaths of a number of kids, people took to the streets. There was hundreds of thousands of people in the streets of Belgium. It's a pretty famous event called the White Marches. And if you look at the footage from those protests, man, it is powerful. I mean, the streets are literally flooded with thousands and thousands of people. And I think it was like 300,000 or so people that showed up to actually protest. And that doesn't sound, I mean, that's a lot of people, but I mean, compared to America, it doesn't sound like a lot. But Belgium's a small country. So that was a significant chunk of the Belgian population that actually came out and marched in support of justice. But what's shocking to me is that in this day and age, we don't see any of that. We've seen nothing of the like in regards to Epstein. We've seen no Kings rallies. We've seen people out in droves protesting ICE. We've seen tons of different protests over the years, but we haven't seen a really, really good, really large Epstein protest. And I feel like people just need to be more angry. And that's why I have hyper fixated in a way on the imagery related to the Epstein case, because, you know, you and I read documents and we're like, oh my God, this is crazy. And you're finding this information. But a lot of people don't want to take the time to actually dive in and read and consume all that information. So by seeing a visual representation of what we're talking about here, for example, that picture of Epstein biting into the child, that is something that awakens like a primal, I feel like, anger in people and disgust. And I feel like if more people were exposed to those types of images and shown what we're actually dealing with here, there would be more of a fire. But I mean, they've done a good job of kind of quelling people and making it seem like something's happening, yet at the same time doing literally nothing at all. And in some cases, like you've talked about, hurt survivors by releasing identities and even nude photographs. Like, I mean, they've done a lot of damage in the process of actually trying to provide a little bit of clarity. I just think people, you know, this isn't an answer to the question, really. I got off topic, but you know, I think people need to be more pissed. You know, it's something that people need to feel like, you know, I'm pissed, but we need to get everybody pissed, because you should be pissed about this. This is something you should be worked up about. And, you know, it just seems like people have kind of stopped, at least for now, caring as much as they did back in February when all of this really was at the kind of boiling point.
Well, Colin, here's a related question, which is, where is, in your estimation, the best index or database of the Epstein files that, you know, outside of the government website?
I really like Gmail, the website. I think that it's really accessible and they've done a really great job of, you know, even if you look through photos, like it took me at the very beginning of this, like so long to find the pictures and go through each individual PDF. It was like a nightmare opening up 1,000 PDF files at a time on my laptop. My computer was like lagging and glitching. It was terrible. But if you go to Gmail or JPhotos or any of those associated kind of websites that are built into Gmail, if you look for something, you'll probably find it. If you're curious about somebody or some rabbit hole and you want to start kind of investigating this for yourself and finding the answers, which I think is important. You know, I can sit here and Nick can sit here and we can tell people all day about what we've found, but there's something powerful about people finding it for themselves. Gmail is a great, easy kind of place to start because it's streamlined and it's, it's got the fake Gmail template built into it. So it's like, it's just a bizarre experience when you're on there.
All right. Thank you, Colin. I also like there's an Epstein archive on GitHub that I
Yeah.
think is pretty well put together too, that I like. Um, Here's another question, and this gets into some of the perhaps more what some might consider more out there questions or theories, but they're legitimate questions, which is, do you think Jeffrey Epstein is still alive?
I have a tendency to believe that he's dead. I believe that William Barr was Donald Trump's attorney general. And William Barr is about as dirty as they come. I wrote a book called The Franklin Scandal, and about and Epstein's kind of a carbon copy of that. He was Bush one's attorney general that covered up the Franklin scandal. And the thing about Epstein, and I look at the two pimps in the Franklin network, Craig Spence and Lawrence King. Both of them were getting a lot of media attention. There were a lot of articles about them. And then after those Miami Herald articles came out, Epstein started to get a lot of media attention. And in the Franklin network, one of the pimps killed himself. I do believe that he killed himself, but I also believe that he was told either, you can do it to yourself or we can do it to you. The other one kept his mouth shut, and he had a no-show job waiting for him in Virginia at a BMW dealership. And I think that we're seeing the same kind of dynamics with Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein is dead, and Ghislaine Maxwell has agreed to keep her mouth shut. And she'll get out, and whatever money that Epstein left for her, which I think is probably very abundant, she'll be taken care of. And
Ghislaine or Larry King is the Ghislaine. I've never thought of it like that.
yeah. And I believe that he's dead. I mean, it would have been so much easier just to kill him than to have him running around. That's what I believe.
I think that, yeah, I'm same as you. I think that he's dead. And then, I mean, obviously there's a trail of death connected to Epstein that we're still seeing unfold. I mean, who was the guy who was just found dead like this week? The guy who was providing girls.
Elite models. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, dude, you could go down the list of the bizarre deaths associated with Epstein. A lot of those defy rational explanation. I mean, what's the guy, Mark Middleton, who was found in the field in Arkansas? He was hung and he shot himself at the same time. Totally normal way to go out.
People do that all the time.
Pretty common.
They shoot themselves while they're hanging themselves.
It's yeah, but I mean that's something I get all the time too. Especially on social media, I see a lot of people saying it's Palm Beach Pete is Epstein, and it's just like, no, I'm sorry, that's not true.
Well, and I would just say that if you read the Bureau of Prisons report on his death, you can see that the government went to a lot of trouble to make sure that he had every opportunity to take his own life or help somebody else do it. So he was certainly not treated like the most notorious criminal in the United States, which at the time that he died, allegedly, he was for sure. So another related question that we have here, you mentioned, Nick, that Ghislaine Maxwell might be getting taken care of from the grave by Jeffrey Epstein in terms of some financial issues. And we have a question about, do you think there was a recent New York Times article in which a former girlfriend of Epstein was identified as someone who might receive as much as $100 million from his estate? Do you think that this person should be investigated more fulsomely or at all?
Her situation, her last name is Shuliak. Her situation is kind of strange. She came here, she's Russian. She came here to go to dental school, and Columbia denied her admission. And then Epstein gave the dental school a lot of money, and then she was accepted as a dental student. And I believe that she's got her degree in dentistry at this point. And we've been told that she is going to get the lion's share of Jeffrey Epstein's fortune, depending upon what that's going to be. I don't know exactly how much, but it's I've read it's up to $50 million. Could be more, could be less.
I mean, that's to me a question that's like, duh, she should have been investigated immediately. I cannot believe that they haven't brought her in, or at least done the whole political theater thing and acted like they were interviewing her and investigating that connection, because it's like she's in so many pictures. She's with him all the time. She's literally his partner. We don't know if it's a partner in crime type of situation or what really that whole thing is. But it's like, dude, clearly she should have been one of the first people that they sat down and interviewed, because she would have been a witness to so many things, even if she wasn't a witness to actual graphic sexual abuse. I mean, there are so many things that she had to have seen and been privy to, knowledge that she had to have been privy to, that, I mean, a person like that could help blow the case wide open even further. I mean, it's already blown open with the files, but it's like her involvement in what she knows could provide an impetus to actually begin an investigation. But yeah, they don't do it. They don't do
There's
it.
no shortage of evidence, and we just need people to join Epstein Justice. And if you're watching our webinar right now, please subscribe. We need to amp our algorithm. And so please subscribe to this webinar, this informative webinar.
That's a new one. Amp the algorithm.
Amp the algorithm, yes.
I like that.
Well, because the algorithm might be being a little bit suppressed. And this is a related question, which is, why isn't our government vigorously pursuing some of these names in the Epstein files in the way that governments of Britain and Norway are pursuing the folks that have been identified that are nationals of those countries?
Well, actually, there's only been a couple of people that have received any kind of punitive in the UK. One was Lord Mandelson, and one was the pedophile formerly known as Prince Andrew. And in Norway, there was a former prime minister and also a diplomat that are under scrutiny. And I found this kind of fascinating. That former prime minister of Norway tried to kill himself when the Epstein files were released. So I think that there is something very incriminating in the Epstein files that pertains to him that has been suppressed. Why would that guy try to kill himself when the Epstein files were released if he didn't think that there was some heavy duty malfeasance on his part?
It's a very good point. I mean, I just think it's ridiculous, man, that they're like, even here, like the people that participated in an attack on an ICE facility get what, 30, 50 years in prison. The people who, regardless of what side of the political aisle you fall on, I mean, the people who literally stormed the Capitol, and even those who did storm the Capitol, to go even further, who gravely injured like police officers, violently attacked people, those people have been released from prison. The people who attacked the ICE facility are going to be spending probably the rest of their lives, if not at least half of their lives, in a prison cell. And yet the pedophiles who molested an uncountable number of children, and we don't even know how far that goes. I mean, all the way to potentially the production of CSAM materials or murder. I mean, there are so many rabbit holes within the Epstein files that are so dark and malignant. And not one of them has even been brought in for questioning. I mean, it's just mind blowing. The way I think about it, Nick and I, we've talked about this. When it comes to arrests and people I've heard people say, well, why doesn't Trump arrest Bill Clinton then if they've done this, or why didn't they do this? In my mind, it's a game to them. If one person crumbles, it's like dominoes. If one person tips, it's going to end the entire thing. One person just has to be arrested and has to squawk and fess up to what they know, and they could bring everybody else down with them if they know enough. So I think it's one of those things where, even though Trump, I mean, I can't believe Trump wouldn't want to make some huge political statement. I'm arresting the Clintons. That's basically like his whole fan base wants to see that more than anything. And yet he doesn't do it. And he has the golden opportunity to do it. So you have to ask yourself, why? I mean, it's not a debate whether or not Epstein was victimizing kids and teenagers and, even, adult women and whoever, and boys. But it's like, why does Trump, for example, not go after his perceived political enemies who it would, I mean, this would be the best thing he could ever do for the people that follow and support him, unless him doing that could cause something bad for him to happen. That's how I think about it. I mean, they all got to know everything about each other, especially at the top, at that kind of nexus of power and wealth and everything. It's like they all know. And that's why none of them really are doing anything. They're afraid.
I've written 3 books on CIA honey traps and blackmail. And it's an integral part of our society. It's an integral part of our power structure. Nobody talks about it. It's not in the media. J. Edgar Hoover blackmailed scores of people, but that didn't come out until years after his death. James Angleton probably was a blackmail artist himself, but that hasn't come out until years after his death. He was the counterintelligence of the CIA, head of counterintelligence. So the blackmail keeps everybody in check. And I've used this analogy before. Once you're compromised, it's like you're on a yacht and it's a beautiful day and it's a beautiful yacht and you can have anything you want on the yacht. But if you decide to get off the yacht, the people on the yacht are going to make sure that you drown. So once you're compromised, it's either you're going to be on the yacht or you're going to drown. And everyone obviously chooses the yacht.
Well, gentlemen, we have a few more questions, and I'm just going to ask this question, which is, can you file a Freedom of Information Act request to ask the Department of Justice who and why photos were removed from the file release dumps? And I do know that there is such a Freedom of Information Act request that's being brought forward in the courts by a well-bankrolled journalist right now. So that is happening. But if either of you want to speak to the process of FOIA requests, that would be great.
I had an interesting adventure with FOIA because the government said after Epstein died that the case was closed. So I sent in a FOIA for evidence. What I wanted, there were a lot of there were hard drives and disks taken out of Epstein's safe in New York. And Epstein had a huge safe. I mean, it wasn't like what we think of with the safe. It was actually like the size of a closet. So I figured, well, I'm going to file this FOIA because the case is closed. And then I got the FBI got back to me and said, well, the case is ongoing. So, and then I filed another one because the case was closed. And then the FBI got back to me again and said the case was ongoing.
Of course. Yeah, I've done so many FOIA requests, and the one thing that I've learned from them all is they're very, very particular. I mean, like I've had to submit the same FOIA, like I think the most that I did was like 16 times until I got a bite, and it was just because they required like a very specific word or wording in the request that, like, it's basically like trying to guess someone's password on a computer. Like you don't know what they're looking for until you actually find the verbiage that they want you to put in the report. But yeah, I mean, what? I mean, even in addition to the files that are going missing, how many have they still not released? What is it, like 3 million? Which is illegal under the Epstein Transparency Act.
Our government is blatantly breaking the law right now as we talk. And Americans, we need to do something about this. We cannot be. I think that, as I said earlier, Americans have been conditioned to believe that they can't affect change because I listed a number of malfeasance that nobody ever got punished for, no heads ever rolled. And I think that the right has been conditioned to hate the left, and the left has been conditioned to hate the right. And I believe that this is an issue that can bring both the right and the left together. That's something we can agree on, that children shouldn't be molested with impunity and the government shouldn't cover up child trafficking. That's something everybody can agree on. And whether they're right or they're left, I know that there are people that are far left and that are involved with Epstein Justice and people that are far right. And we welcome everyone, whether you're right, you're left, regardless of what your creed is, your race is, your religion. I mean, we welcome everyone that has a sincere heart to make sure that this can happen.
Even registered independents like me.
Yes, even registered independents like Pete.
So another question that we have, though, and I think this is a pretty good question and a legitimate one. Has anyone bothered to ask if any of those children that Epstein was holding, are they children of Epstein's so-called friends? Did Epstein's friends have Epstein abuse these children for them, for their own gratification? Do we know any of this? Is that something that's too far beyond the pale to consider?
With incest in families, we see that the perpetrator farms out the kids. That happened with Virginia Giuffre. She was molested by her father, and then her father farmed her out to a friend of his. So I think when you get into these really sick families, absolutely, they're abusing each other's kids without a doubt. I don't think that's beyond the pale with Jeffrey Epstein. That certainly could be happening, or certainly could have happened with Epstein.
Well, that's also, I mean, that's kind of the whole point of why I brought those pictures. And that's just a small snippet of the photographs that are actually available to view in the files that are publicly available. I mean, there are so many kids and there are so many faces of kids, and not only kids in pictures that were hung up in Epstein's properties, but I mean, just photographs of kids that were found on his devices. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of children that are seen in the files and referenced in the files, in the writing and the documents themselves. And yet I don't know of a single kid that they've actually tried to identify or reach out to from a federal level. I know that people online have tried to identify kids. And I mean, you can look at the picture like I showed you of Glenn Dubin sitting behind the kid. And I'm sure that that's his child that's seen in that photo, but it's like, I don't think that they've ever interviewed any of those children. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that I'm not, because this is the Epstein story. Why would they interview those kids? They don't care about this story at all. And that would be a place where, if I were an investigator, I would start immediately with the survivors that have come forward already and shared their stories publicly. I mean, just start with the people that have talked about their stories in the media to the world, the incredibly brave people that have actually spilled their guts to the entire planet's population. And then go to the people that weren't willing to talk, the people who haven't been in the limelight at all, the people who have stayed quiet, and then go to the kids, because it's like those we're talking about a guy who was a registered sex offender, convicted of crimes against minors, who lived in homes covered with pictures of children and naked. I don't know. They could be teenagers. They could be adults. We don't know. I mean, it's like, I don't know, going to a I don't know what a good comparison was. I was gonna say going to a mouse's house and seeing his walls are full of cheese. Like, of course he loves the cheese. He's gonna have cheese everywhere. I mean, he loves kids. He's a pedophile. He loves the youth. So he's got it everywhere. Or like Nick, you said, like a trophy, like a sick serial killer trophy. Um, it's just shocking. You look at the pictures and then you consider, federal authorities have also looked at these pictures, and the people who've looked at these pictures have decided there's nothing in this picture worth investigating when it's literally a picture of a pedophile biting into a child's underwear. So that says it all in regards to Epstein for me personally. It's like, if they're not willing to look into that, what else are they actually going to look into? I mean, that's like the clearest piece of potential evidence you could hope for. Literally Epstein biting into a child's underwear, and yet nothing. Crickets, silence.
Colin, question for you specifically. First of all, the questioner wants you to know that you are doing awesome work, which I happen to agree with. But the question is, why did you decide to change your focus from the paranormal to a greater focus on crime?
That's interesting. Well, Courtney, my wife, and I started our true crime podcast back in 2021. And, I've been doing the paranormal for 11 years. Like, we could talk all day. Grew up in a haunted house. I've had tons of experiences. And that was always my passion, is, film, and then combining my passion for film with the paranormal. But as Courtney and I kind of progressed on our journey doing Murder in America, we started covering some different stories and taking about look back at, for example, serial killer cases that you could deconstruct from a modern perspective, like specifically the Son of Sam murders and John Wayne Gacy, and how Gacy was involved with John David Norman, another known pedophile, sex trafficker, kind of like Epstein. And so that was like a little crack that appeared in my worldview when we covered that story. And then I learned about Frank Sheldon and North Fox Island and the Oakland County child killings and the murders, and I started covering that. And the more I started covering that, the more I started researching. And of course, I was talking about Epstein way back in 2022 as well on my social media. But ultimately, this all led me to Nick, and Nick and I haven't announced what we've been working on yet, but we've been on an odyssey of our own for 2 years, producing a series that obviously goes into subjects like this. And that has completely changed my view on everything, because, I've shown people my experiences in the paranormal, and I've documented a lot of what I set out to document, but just seeing the amount of injustice that's out there was really shocking to me. And I always, when I built my platforms, I wanted to use them for something for good. Like, I used to advocate a lot for like, I talked shit about the Confederacy and like Confederate statues, and like I lobbied with my TikTok years ago for a plaque to be built for a guy who was lynched in Texas, and they had no memorial for the guy. And the petition actually grew, and they ended up building the memorial, which was great. But, I realized over time that the thing that I had built for myself could be used to actually help people in a way, or at least to inform people. And so I've always hated the government as well. Like, I wrote a letter in high school to the newspaper about how corrupt my state government was. And I actually got a letter back sent to my high school by a state senator who wrote a handwritten letter telling me how wrong I was and how I should mind my own business because I'm just a little kid, essentially. So yeah, I've always been one to lobby for the underrepresented and the voices that are unheard. And I mean, just look at what's happened today. I never expected to be here doing these stories and like working with survivors and traveling the world and trying to tell these stories, but they're important, man. People are they're afraid to talk about this stuff, especially on social media. You can get banned. I've been on the verge of a ban dozens of times on all my accounts, demonetized on so many platforms so many times. It's like, it's a thing that scares people. And of course, when I first started doing it too, I got called QAnon, Pizzagate, whatever. Colin's going off the deep end. He's a lunatic. He's crazy. But then all this shit came out in February, and it was like, I've known that this is how these networks operate because I've been working on these projects, but now people are starting to see it, and it's not this crazy inaccessible concept that is like something from a horror movie. Like, this is reality, and it's unfortunately a grim reality, but we just, like Nick's been saying this whole time, we have to together advocate for reform and change, because that's what's going to do it. If enough people are pissed, if enough people want change, if enough people stand up, that's when people will start to notice, the small group of people at the very top. So yeah, it's been a weird journey though. Like, but it's been incredibly rewarding, man, sitting and crying with survivors and hearing their stories, and just being there and helping to tell these stories that people have ignored for decades. It's rewarding for me as well, because I feel like it's a greater purpose.
Well, Colin, thank you, and that's a very moving answer, and a one that I identify with. And Nick, a question for you. We have someone on YouTube who's saying, did you say Zero Hedge? It is zerohedge.com, that the recent article about Reid Hoffman and his connection to a group that might be exploiting Epstein survivors is at. That's correct, right? Zerohedge.com.
Zero Hedge, yes. You can Google Nick Bryant, Zero Hedge, Epstein.
Excellent.
I'm sure you'll land on the article.
And well worth reading, I have to say, because it just goes to illustrate the fact that not only are Epstein's victims not getting justice, but they're still being actively exploited and used for purposes that are, I think, most grotesque. That all being said, we have a couple of other questions too. And one of them has to do with the Katie Fang lawsuit. That refers to the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit that I was referring to earlier. And the judge has requested that Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche appear soon with his proof that the redactions and materials that have been held back thus far, that those redactions are justified. So we'll see if the legal system itself can bring forth more materials. Do either of you have a further comment about that?
Doubt it, personally. I mean, this administration that we're under, they don't care. They don't care about, I mean, look at what's already happened with the Epstein thing. Like, they obviously don't listen. They don't listen to the law. It's like Nick just said, they're actively breaking the law right now. So they're going to find some sort of loophole or some way to maneuver out of this. I mean, they're the ones that ultimately are in control. Like, a law is a law, yeah, but we're dealing with human beings. Human beings are flawed. Human beings are narcissistic and egotistical. And it's like, we're dealing with people that they just don't care, and they actively don't want this stuff to come out because, regardless if you like Trump or not, a lot of people that are in the administration have been complicit in this entire affair, whether in the cover up or the actual Epstein story itself. So one thing I'll say before I turn this to Nick, I thought it was amazing how they, during the proceedings, pulled up one of the documents where it was Trump's lawyer. Something that I've always heard, and I get this all the time because social media, thousands of comments on every Epstein video I make. So many people, don't you know Trump kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago? He threw him out there. And it's like, what actually happened, if you look at the documents, you look at what they talked about in the open hearings. Trump's own lawyer, who was his lawyer at one point, testified and said Epstein was never even a member of the club, so it was impossible. I'm paraphrasing here again, but it was impossible for him to be thrown out, and that it never happened. I mean, to me, that's something that that should be immediately then cut from the story, and people should stop repeating that lie. That should be blasted everywhere. But for some reason, that's still like a myth within the case. So it's really hard to even, draw people out of like the world that they've built up for themselves within the Epstein story and the version of the truth they decide to believe in, because there really are different camps. But Nick said something great in the project that we're working on. He said his allegiance is to the truth. The truth is objective, and that's really all it is. Like, if there's somebody that I love, a politician that I adore, that pops up in the Epstein files and allegedly was complicit in the abuse of children, I'm not going to like that politician anymore. Like, it's simple as that. Like, it's not that you pick sides for me. It's like, if someone's a bad person, they're a bad person. But yeah, I just don't see anything actually happening with that.
Nick, your thoughts?
Well, as I've said, this is both Republican and Democrats. It's two different parties that have been dedicated to covering this up. If it was just the Republicans, the Democrats would have jumped on it. If it was just the Democrats, the Republicans would have jumped on it. So this is a disease that is at the heart of our government. And I know that the left and the right are heavily polarized right now, but it's both parties, or else it would have been broken open a long time ago.
I have three remaining questions. One of the questions is, what would stop President Trump from simply pardoning himself or anybody else involved? What would stop him from doing that? The answer is nothing. Constitutionally speaking, he can pardon whomever he wants, including himself. In fact, he doesn't really need to, because the Supreme Court has already awarded the president, whomever the president is, broad immunity from basically anything. So he wouldn't really have to pardon himself, most likely, but nothing could stop him from pardoning others from a constitutional standpoint. And then here's, I think, a very significant question. One for you and one for you, Nick. One for you, Colin, one for you, Nick. Colin, for you, what do you think about what New Mexico is doing in terms of the Department of Justice refusal to do any kind of investigation into the Zorro Ranch?
I mean, I think New Mexico, that is a enclave of hope right now, because there do seem to be people in New Mexico. I believe it's Melanie Stansberry, right? She's the one who's like really outspoken. Um, there do seem to be people there who are actually trying to get to the bottom of this. But I mean, you go back to the same old, where it's like, you could ask the Department of Justice all you want for what you need, but if they're trying to cover something up, they're not going to help, So it's like, and it's also weird. I mean, with Zorro Ranch, man, you could talk for hours about that. I mean, the fact that they didn't search it until this year, I mean, that's whatever, 6-7 years of being able to clear out whatever was there. You've got all these different rabbit holes within Zorro and just strange things, even like the caboose that was on the property that disappeared a few years ago. I just talked about that in a video too. But from a personal standpoint, I think Zorro was really, really evil. And it's more of a spiritual thing that, like, when I was standing there and looking at it, you can just feel this, like, this almost otherworldly sense of like, this is like a literally like evil place where there was a true darkness, and you can still feel that today. Not to get metaphysical and paranormal here, but I feel that that is the final frontier of where they could really uncover so much in regards to this story. Is through Zorro Ranch, whether it's, an actual full property, full cadaver dog, intense search, walking every foot of the Zorro Ranch land, searching the nearby ridges and kind of mountainous areas, going the extra mile, or even just interviewing the people that work there and really like diving into that. I feel that that's going to be a key in the future, is figuring out exactly what happened there, because I mean, I know, Nick, you're good friends with Juliet, one of the survivors, and like she even told me she saw a UFO hovering over Zorro Ranch. I mean, it's a place of really, really high strangeness. And when you get to the Epstein story, a UFO is like the least weird thing that was apparently seen or that happened around Zorro Ranch. That's kind of like base level, like weirdness. But yeah, I'm hoping that something comes out of it. But that's all you can do is hope and never lose hope, I guess.
And continue to fight. Well, two more quick questions. One of these is for you, Nick, and I'll take a stab at it too. Why do you think Ohio will not go after Les Wexner for any crimes he may have committed in that state? And part of the answer is, hey, they won't even take his name off of the medical center at Ohio State University. His name's all over Ohio State University. They're certainly not going to prosecute a man whose name is over all the buildings at Ohio State University. But Nick, what are your thoughts about why Ohio will not go after Les Wexner?
I agree with you, Pete. And actually, there have been fairly large demonstrations at that university. Like there's been a demonstration at Columbia too, and they want Epstein et al. Off campus. And Ohio State isn't willing to even go that far as to remove Wexner's name from a number of buildings, which is a true tragedy. And it really shows the kind of power that he has. As I said earlier, the Oversight Committee flew to Ohio instead of subpoenaing Wexner and bringing him to Washington, D.C. I thought, whoa, I mean, what's up with that? Wexner has a tremendous amount of power, and it's pretty obvious to me that the administration at Ohio State doesn't want to trifle with Wexner at this point.
Well, one thing,
as soon as he dies, well, hopefully before then, but definitely after he dies, his name's going to be removed from everything.
yeah, right. If people haven't read it, I'll say about Wexner, look up the article published about Les Wexner and his Dybbuk, the Jewish demon. It's a really, really interesting article where he talks about this little demon that follows him around, and it's like a metaphor, but it's also like, does this dude actually have, he's like describing it like it's a real creature that's following him around. It's really, really bizarre, but it's 100% real. So I encourage you guys, if you haven't read that, look it up for yourself, take it in, and then come up with your own judgment on Wexner.
And then the final question that I think we have time for tonight is, and this is obviously one that's very serious. And the question is, where do victims turn to when law enforcement won't take their testimony or won't take them seriously in a sex trafficking case?
Well, that's a tragedy, is according to, we've stated repeatedly, according to our federal government, Epstein and Maxwell acted alone. And they created no child abuse material. They downloaded all the internet. I mean, those are just straight out lies. And it really puts survivors in a difficult position because they were trafficked. They know who they were trafficked. And yet our government is saying, no, you weren't trafficked, to anyone other than Epstein and Maxwell. And according to the Centers for Disease Control, 25% of underage girls have been molested and 5% of underage boys. And that is, people in the field think it's slightly conservative for girls and extremely conservative for boys. But if you just go with those numbers, there's over 50 million Americans that have been molested when they were underage. And that's another reason why this is so important, because if these 50 million people see a case of proven child trafficking covered up, are they going to have any hope for justice whatsoever? So that's another reason why we need transparency and trials, not files, with Epstein, is because there's There's 50 million survivors in America, and they need to see justice.
I mean, you know this, Nick. I mean, how disturbing is it that you have all these, now adult women who were oftentimes abused when they were minors, um, who have spoken to almost every single news station under the sun, every newspaper, every outlet they can possibly try to share their story with. And yet, the one group that will not listen to them is the authorities. I mean, it's insane. It's like so many of these Epstein survivors have spoken even to overseas media. They've spoken to the BBC. They've spoken to groups in whatever country, including every single outlet here in America. And yet no one will interview them. No one will actually take down their allegations as what it should be, evidence. And to me, I mean, I think that obviously people speaking out and survivors going to the media with those stories helped to create the push that eventually obviously got Epstein busted and then killed him, allegedly, according to Pete. But yeah, if people didn't speak out, this oftentimes if people don't speak out about these stories and even their own personal stories of abuse, nothing's ever done. And that's just a sad reality for survivors of any type of sexual crime, really. The burden falls onto them to try to get justice for themselves. And when you're fighting against a corrupt and broken system, that can be daunting, but that's why it's just incredible that we have so many people that are so powerful that have refused to give up their voices. And one day something's going to happen. I know that it's going to happen, but until then, we just got to keep on trucking.
So subscribe to Epstein Justice and join us as we trudge this road to justice.
Nick, thank you. Colin, thank you. What a blessing it's been to hear from both of you this evening. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening and attending, and good night. God bless you all.